Good evening or good afternoon to you all. It is my absolute honor to welcome Liz Smith, obviously CEO and chairman of Blooming Brands. And Liz has also brought with her this afternoon a couple of friends and colleagues, so I think it's important for me to mention them too. Pablo Brizzi, who is the CHRO of Blooming Brands. I was also told, and welcome Pablo, Pablo is originally from Argentina and is apparently the only Argentinian who gets on with the Brazilians that I have ever met. Because if you know the history, it's kind of like the South Africans and the Australians, we just don't get on. The Brazilians and the Argentinians also struggle with that, but I had a long discourse with Pablo and he assures me he gets on with the Brazilians. And I was really surprised to discover that Bonefish has such a big investment in Brazil, yes, which I was not aware of. So the next time I go to São Paulo, I can assure you I'll be looking after the restaurant down there. It's also equally important for me to welcome a number of JVPs. Now, when I saw JVP, I didn't know what it was. I know what an SVP is, Senior Vice President. When I saw JVP and a whole list, I thought it's really not cool to call people junior vice presidents. And it actually turns out that they're actually the joint venture partners of Blooming Brands. And we have Jackie Starr and Liz Shaler from Outback Steakhouse. We have Clint Lloyd from Carrabba's Italian Grill. And we also have Seth Baker and Jason Sartain from Bonefish Grill. So they're all down here. I was going to speculate that these are all representative of the 5 restaurants that are close by here in Colombia of those 3 brands. But Seth just confused me and says, no, he comes from somewhere else, and that's when I just gave up. But nevertheless, you know you are welcome, and we are delighted that they could join you. I also wanted to let you know that we have 2 Gamecocks in the house. Who have also joined Liz here this evening. And the first one is Marty Lanahan, who is with us. And I was embarrassed when I got the information this morning about Marty, and we were told she was a USC graduate. And of course, I immediately fired back, do we know where she's from and what she's gotten? No, we have no idea. It turns out she's a finance person from the Moore School, which is really embarrassing. But since one of our values is taking accountability for your failures, we have to acknowledge it. And I said to Marty, I didn't know that you were at the Moore School, and I'm really embarrassed. But Marty, you are so welcome to be with us here tonight. And then Sharon Robinson. And Sharon is also here. And Sharon, I'm going to ask you the question now, because I can tell you if I can't get Marty right, how the heck do you think I can get you right? You are a USC graduate. You're not a Moore School graduate, though, right? School of Journalism. Well, welcome to you both. Those are our 2 Gamecocks in the house that have joined us to celebrate this wonderful event with Liz. For the students in the room, I do think it is important that you listen very, very carefully to the advice and the information that Liz provides to you. Because Liz is not only a phenomenal leader, as you will hear from Professor Wright in a few moments, she also is somebody who's been a CEO of a company for almost a decade, which, by the way, is over twice the average tenure of a US-based CEO. And let me tell you, you've got to be pretty good and pretty smart to make that happen. So listen to her carefully. The other reason why I want you to listen to her carefully is because there are 2 Bonefishes, all right, let me get this right, 2 Bonefish Grills, 2 Outback Steakhouses, and 1 Carrabba's Italian Grill in Colombia. And what you must all do at least once, if not more, after this event is go out there and celebrate and say you know Liz. See what the people say. I suspect that's all I need to say, Pat. It's entirely up to you. It is my honor to welcome you all here as Dean of the Moore School.
All right, thanks, Pete. So on behalf of the Center for Executive Succession, I want to welcome all of you today to this, the 2nd annual Leadership Legacy Award ceremony. Just to give you a little bit of history about the Center for Executive Succession, for those of you who don't know about it, about 4.5 years ago, we started the center with the mission of being the objective source of knowledge around C-suite issues, challenges, and best practices the C-suite succession issues. And the idea of being objective was that if you look at who's in that space doing research right now, mostly it's consulting firms. And nothing against consulting firms. Some of my best friends are consultants. But you just never know when you see research coming out of a consulting firm, is it truth or is it them trying to sell a practice in some way? And so our goal was to be the objective entity that just does research to help companies. And so we don't do consulting, we don't charge anybody for any consulting or advice. We have partner companies, and we've gone from 10 partner companies when we began to 34 partner companies to so we just hired our new executive director, Ken Carrig. We've sent out about 5 new invoices in the last couple of days, so I think we'll be at about 40 companies pretty soon. But all of these companies are invested in supporting the research that we do, and we've done a number of studies, and really the idea behind the research we do is that we want to be able to provide knowledge to all of the major stakeholders that are involved in C-suite succession, in particular CEOs, board members, and chief HR officers. And so we've done a number of quantitative and qualitative studies where we've involved CEOs, board members, and chief HR officers. And our hope is that we're providing knowledge and information that's helping companies to be more effective in how they do all of their C-suite succession, but in particular their CEO succession. Now, about 2 years ago, we decided to create the Leadership Legacy Award. And the idea behind this award was to recognize a CEO who is personally invested in developing talent within the C-suite pipeline. And the idea by personally, what I mean by that is that, again, there are a number of awards out there, you know, say the Fortune Best Companies for Leaders, where the CEO's involvement in leadership development may be signing a budget line to support the leadership development program, and that they, as individuals, don't see it as part of their responsibility to be personally involved, personally committed, and personally invested in developing the next generation of talent. So the criteria that we set for the award, just to read it to you, is a minimum of 3 years of experience in the focal CEO role, because we don't want somebody new that's kind of a bright, shiny object. They demonstrate personal commitment to the C-suite succession processes. They exhibit organizational investment and personal involvement in developing leaders to create the pipeline for future C-suite talent. They deliver strong organizational performance in the eyes of shareholders, customers, suppliers, and employees. They have a reputation for personal integrity in relationships and decisions. They're a role model of effective leadership practices, and they've got a commitment to continuous personal learning and development. So those are the criteria that we use as part of the nomination process. And just to give you an idea of how this process works, we ask the chief HR officers to nominate their CEO if they believe that their CEO fits these criteria. Again, CHROs know the personal involvement of that CEO. And one thing that when I talk about the best companies for leaders, over the 2 years that we've had this award, we have yet to get a nominee from a company that was one of the best companies for leaders. So I think it does support the idea that often these kind of awards that or these lists of leaders are really more of a process and not so much a CEO's personal investment in that. Once the CHROs have nominated their CEOs, we have a panel of CHROs who go through the nominations and choose 2 to 3 finalists. Those finalists then, we interview 2 board members for each of the finalists, 2 of their board directors members. And I want to thank and recognize DJ Shepker and Anthony Nyberg. The 3 of us conduct these interviews with the board members, and we're trying to get the board members' perspective on that CEO in terms of, do they see the CEO as having this personal investment in talent? Do they see the CEO as personally invested in their own development? And how is their kind of perception of that CEO's leadership style? Once those interviews are done, we put together a packet where we write up summaries of the interviews with the board members. We put the nomination that was submitted by the CHRO, and then DJ gets the financials on the companies for all of the finalists. And we have a committee made up of 5 members of public company boards that are not associated with the center at all. They're just members of public company boards that have agreed to participate in this. We send them the packets, and they choose the winner. So we have no influence as a center over who the winner is. We just put together the information and let these board members make the decision. So with that in mind, I will say that the outcome this year obviously was the choice of Liz Smith, the CEO and chairman of Bloomin' Brands. And just to give you an idea of why she won, I just want to read some of her accomplishments. She joined the company in 2009 and led a massive turnaround that corrected the negative trends coming out of the 2008 recession. They regained profitability in 2010, posting $100 million in profit and $3.8 billion in revenue. She led an IPO in 2012, raising $200 million to fund growth, and renamed the company at that point Bloomin' Brands, where it was formerly OSI Restaurant Partners. Bloomin' Brands has been named to one of Fortune magazine's world's most admired companies in both 2013 and 2018. The brands within Bloomin' Brands are consistently ranked in the top 5 consumer picks by segment, overall in the nation's top trade publication, Nation's Restaurant News, including the #1 ranking in both seafood and Italian. Liz has been recognized nationally by the Women's Forum of New York for leadership in creating a gender-balanced board of directors, which is one thing that I think is extremely unique. And I'd say the board members that we interviewed pointed to the fact that within the industry, Bloomin' Brands has become the source that competitors want to poach talent from. Just to give you an idea of that, my favorite story is Dave Pace, who I met about 20 years ago. He was the chief HR officer at Starbucks. Dave is a really business-savvy HR guy. So how many HR students do we have in the audience? Okay, so great to hear. And here's a story that should be a model for all of you. When Dave was at Starbucks, Jim Donald was the CEO at the time, and Jim kept wanting to put Dave on the CEO succession list. And his board refused to put him on the list because they said he's an HR guy. And so he said repeatedly he would ask the board to do that, and they refused to consider Dave. When Liz hired Dave in 2010, she actually gave him responsibility not just for HR, but also for development. And then she put him in charge of Roy's and Fleming's till finally he was the president of Carrabba's. He is now the CEO of Jamba Juice. He's left Bloomin' Brands, and that's just an example both of the fact that that industry is looking to Liz's direct reports as a source of talent, and I think a model for HR folks that can be business leaders as well as HR leaders. So a couple of quotes from her board members. One is, one of the board members stated, "Confidence, strength, and humility, knowing who you are, how you lead, how you inspire people are her strengths." Another one said, "She's impressive. The world will be blown away by Liz. People look up to her. She's so impressive. Everyone in your school will say, I want to be like Liz Smith. She's one of the most awesome business leaders in the world." So, the Center for Executive Succession in the Dartlemore School of Business at the University of South Carolina is proud to present the 2018 Leadership Legacy Award to Liz Smith, the chairman and CEO at Bloomin' Brands. Liz? We have to. And before I turn it over to Liz for her talk, I also want to recognize that part of this award is that we donate a $10,000 check to the charity of the winner's choice, and Liz has chosen for this check this year to go to Big Brothers and Big Sisters of America. So that check is in process right now, and hopefully soon Big Brothers and Big Sisters will get $10,000 on Liz's behalf. So thanks, Liz.
Good afternoon. Okay, I think just first and foremost, we can start out by acknowledging that if you ever want anyone to introduce you, it's surely Professor Wright or your mother. Wow. Thank you. I really am thrilled to be here today, and I want to thank you for this Legacy Leadership Award. I was told, 25 minutes prepared remarks and then Q&A, and I am very much kind of an extemporaneous. Let's get through the prepared remarks and head into the Q&A because I really want to hear what's on your mind and have a dialogue. But I am really touched and honored to be receiving this award. It has tremendous meaning to me. It really does. And, the truth is, I'm only here because I had the good fortune in my career to work with some amazing leaders and talent developers that took the time to mentor and coach me. I don't think it's a surprise that 5 of my previous bosses ended up being Fortune 500 CEOs. How lucky am I, right? And they took the time to mentor and teach and nurture me. They also believed that their company's most important asset was the nurture and development of their people, and that translated into good business results. So I am blessed by having had their gentle hand and guidance, and sometimes stern lectures to guide me. I'm thinking of them as I accept this today, as well as the great team members that I have here, and I would just ask them to stand because they really are the best in the business, and they're recognized as such and phenomenal, and I so appreciate them joining me. So. I also want to acknowledge Pablo, who he really does get along with the Brazilian team. We have about $500 million worth of business down there, and what Pablo says goes. So I do want to confirm that for you, Peter. As well as you said, another Gamecock, a dear friend of mine, Marty Lanahan, who was just recently also quite a successful business leader, retired as a bank president, and is a very proud Gamecock. So I brought her along for street cred, I guess. Before, you guys are all familiar with our brands, hopefully. Who's familiar with the brands? If you're not, just lie to me. Perfect. Just a brief background about our company I'm really proud of. Outback is celebrating its 30th year anniversary this year, which is pretty cool. 4 restaurant veterans opened up the first Outback 30 years ago in Tampa, and they had an idea to open up 4 that they could each operate, and then it would be great because they would only be open for dinner, and they could play golf and see their friends and family during the day. That really was the big vision for Outback. But as Outback took off and became a phenom, the founders became open to growing the company with additional brands, and today we do have 4 founder-inspired brands across the world. We have a very big international business, particularly in Latin America, but they're all really organized and united by the founders' core principles that are called our principles and beliefs. And I bet if I asked any of these guys, they could get up and recite them. And that really blew me away when I first got there, is how foundational they are. Oftentimes it's that plaque in the corner that nobody ever looks at. Oh, yeah, there's our mission statement. This company lives and breathes these principles and beliefs, and they're pretty basic. They're about putting people first, and the principles of hospitality, sharing, quality, fun, and courage. The past 9 years, and you're absolutely right, Peter, 9 years can feel like a long time in a public company, but it has been amazing and exhilarating and challenging, and I continue to be inspired by the 94,000 team members that are dedicated to serving our customers every day. I'm very, very humbled by their commitment. So when I received this award and the folks at USC asked me to speak with you about my career and leadership, the first thing that I realized right away is that I was going to have to come clean. I had no strategic ascent up a corporate ladder, okay? My reality is more like climbing, negotiating, and often stumbling across a ropes course, which continues to challenge me. So let's just put that out there to begin with. I really want to talk to you about a couple things that I've learned along the way, and I thought I'll talk about 5 things that I've learned over the last 30 years. As you can see, I am not a quick learner. Figure once every 6 years, I banked an insight, and I want to share those. But I did want to share a little of the wisdom I picked up along the way and some of the choices I've made, both the good ones and the bad ones, and why I made them, in the hopes that they resonate with you as others' advice in the past has really resonated with me and helped me along the way over the years. So the first one is, if I had to sum up this speech, or it had a title, or my work philosophy, number 1 would be, and I know there's so many students here, and so I'm really talking directly to you guys, please give yourself permission to figure it out as you go along. I promise you, I know this doesn't have the crisp ring of 7 successful habits or 5 keys to success, but it's the most important piece of advice that I can give you and that I want to leave you with today. I have never had a master plan that has guided my decisions that I skillfully orchestrated. In retrospect, I've learned that master plans are restrictive versus instructive. As I look back, the best experiences I've had were the unforeseen ones. The unexpected detours, the leaps of faith. It is okay In fact, it's preferable to not have it all figured out. I'm often struck when talking to young professionals and MBAs how much anxiety there is about not knowing that they don't have it entirely thought out. And I get questioned, what's the best job to take out of business school? When's the right time to do X? When should you change? I get asked a lot, when's the best time to have a child? And I always say, when you're pregnant. And because what I mean by that is there is no right answer. There's only the next step, and then you will figure it out as you go along. So stop thinking that there's something that you should be knowing that's going to guide it. Jump in. Dive in. That's how life and your career unfolds and leads to the most success. The 3 major career changes I have had in my life were entirely unplanned, and frankly, none of them made sense on paper. I only planned to stay at Kraft Foods when I graduated from business school. For 3 years, I ended up staying at 14. And a little bit at the 10th anniversary, when you get the watch, I was thanking them, but a small piece of me inside was dying, because I thought, wow, I would have thought I started my own company by this time. I left Kraft Foods to go to Avon after starting a dialogue with Andrea Jung, the CEO there. You know how we met? We met as kindergarten mothers, our 2 sons, with the last 2 to separate. And so we were stuck there for 2 weeks in a little room while they sobbed. Each of us grateful that the other ones was having trouble too, because you don't ever want to be the only one that's stuck there. And so we started this dialogue. When I left Avon in 2009 to become CEO of Bloomin' Brands, which was really struggling and on the ropes, we had gone private, put an enormous amount of debt load, and then this small thing called the recession happened and people stopped dining out. Fortune magazine wrote an article that said Liz Smith's odd leap to CEO. Okay, so it doesn't have to make sense to the world, it has to make sense to you. And I think the reality is being adaptable is really key for on-the-job performance as well. I think one of the most important leadership traits you can have is to be a nimble and agile leader who is comfortable with ambiguity. If the last few years have taught us anything, it's that there is no such thing as knowing what the future holds. As we all navigate this world, we need business leaders who are comfortable to some extent figuring it out as you go along. And I know this is at odds with what many of us has been taught, that great leaders communicate a clear strategy and action plans to be implemented by their groups. And the reality is you cannot have a fixed long-term strategy the way we used to define it in such uncertain times. I am on the board of the Atlanta Federal Reserve, and I know that you can ask the leading economists in the world, and they will give you different answers about what to expect next year. And they have some pretty fancy analytics and some pretty great degrees, and even they cannot come to one conclusion about what's going to happen a year from now. So as leaders, we must, of course, have a clear vision of our company's core competency and what we do best, but strategic planning must give way to scenario planning. Our company, Bloomin' Brands, annual operating plans, they're really just strategic roadmaps, frameworks, and priorities. They're probably about 60% of the way there of what you have studied or would consider a traditional classic long-range plan. We have various options identified depending on how competition and the macroeconomic environment unfold. So this requires you as leaders and as HR professionals, because you guys are the ones that are training folks and how they can think and act and be most successful. It requires us to be comfortable with ambiguity and have the stomach for fast turns that will be necessary to compete. So give yourself permission to figure it out as you go along. Even though I have never had a single game plan for my career, I have had one guiding force that has driven my choices, and that is really the conviction to never settle for what is comfortable unless it is also deeply fulfilling. And that leads me to the second thing that I have learned, and that is to be successful, quote unquote, you have to find out what inspires you uniquely and never settle. I graduated from Stanford Business School in 1990, and I caught the startup bug big time, just like all the other fellow classmates. And a very wise professor advised me to spend a few years getting trained in actually how to run a company before I tried to start one. So I went to Kraft Foods for what I thought was it would be 3 years, because at that age I thought, well, 3 years will give me time to figure out how to run a company. And I'll knock that out and go off and do it. Well, 3 years turned into 14 years. I loved marketing and I loved being in a customer environment. And every time that I felt like I'd reached a plateau, some new adventure or something new interesting project would come along and present itself. But over the years, and you're going to find this. You are going to feel very vulnerable to losing your way, and you're going to be occasionally plagued by guilt or self-doubt about what I should be doing. Everyone's running over there. In my day, it was investment banking, it was consulting, it was startups, and now it's technology, okay? And you get plagued by this, and you forget, I would think to myself, what should I be doing? Even if I was perfectly happy in the situation I was in, right? And what, I needed to remember that I needed to follow my heart and not what was sexy or trendy. So during the first internet boom, and this is definitely aging myself, in the late 1990s, I was on a ski trip with about 20 fellow business school classmates, and all the discussion around the table was about how everyone was leaving the old economy, manufacturing, service. In fact, one of my classmates, and she was amazing then, she's amazing now, is Mary Barra, who's the GM, CEO of GM. And we were on this ski trip that we took annually, and everyone's talking about, get out of the old economy, head over into the new economy, which at that time was the internet and the various startups. And we're all around the table, talking, and there's like 20 of us. And so one of my classmates, who I haven't talked to since, no, I'm kidding. One of my classmates turned to me, and it's one of those situations where the table goes silent, and he says, why are you staying in packaged goods? Why do you want to miss out on the second industrial revolution? So, so suddenly everyone's staring at me, and I was like, and that's a very hard question to answer when your job at the time is selling Jell-O gelatin. What was wrong with me? Why did I want to miss out on the second industrial revolution? Why didn't I want to go work for ePets or eToys or Webvan, none of which you know? What was wrong with me? And the answer was simple. I was following my passion. I'm very comfortable with technology, but I'm more interested in how it's an enabler to connect people in physical brand experience. That's what turns me on. Packaged goods, restaurants, hospitality, that's where I get my energy, and it's where these folks get their energy and why they're so darn good at what they do. So, that's what I love, and that's what inspires me. So rather than follow what was trendy, I stayed because I realized that success would only come through the honest intersection of what I loved and what I was good at. It's got to be an intersection of the two, because there might be things you love, and that's where you have to have the talk with yourself that says, am I good at this? Or you might be good at something and think, just because you're good at something, you don't have to do it. I started out in investment banking. I was pretty good at it, much to everyone's surprise. I thought, I actually really don't like this very much, right? But everyone's like, you got a coveted job, keep going in it. So really honor the intersection of what you're good at and what turns you on. So this, kind of longing for personal fulfillment is really guided when I eventually did leave Kraft. It really came to me naturally. And I realized that one day, through no fault of the company, is that I no longer felt inspired, and I deserved more, and frankly, so did Kraft Foods, and it was simply time to replant myself. And at Kraft, I was president of a $6 billion sector, and I was on track for the next promotion, and which would have been like a $25–30 billion company as head of Kraft Foods North America, when I met Andrea Jung in the kindergarten ante-room, as I talked to you guys about. And we just began a dialogue about Avon. We had a lot of time. The position wasn't even fleshed out. We just it was more of an invitation to help her come on board and help her transform the company. And so I remember we made up my title on a napkin at Starbucks. There must not have been an Outback nearby, as I recall. And it was like, okay, what a brand president. So that was it. And I took the leap over there. And I really enjoyed my 5 years at Avon. They were incredible. The last 2 were as president. And I had no plans to leave. However, my boss, Andrea, was fairly entrenched as a CEO. She was talented doing, and I knew that I would have to leave if I ever wanted to be a CEO in a time frame, but that was as far as the discussion went. But then that familiar pattern unfolded. I started a serendipitous dialogue about Bloomin' Brands, which I had never heard of. I mean, I knew the restaurants, with the founders and CEO, Bill Allen. And they were looking for someone to come and help lead the company through the next era of growth. And from the outside, I had been a longtime fan, admirer, and guest with 2 sons. I was a big guest of Outback. And with $4 billion in revenue and 1,400 restaurants, their 20-year growth story was a phenomenon. And I was a great admirer of the managing partners and how they managed the restaurant. So I certainly was impressed with the company's history and business results and growth, but I'm a person that makes my decision and leads with the head and the heart. They both have to be engaged. And so where my head was intrigued by the opportunity, it didn't really come to life until I went down to Tampa and I met with the founders and Bill Allen. And I was wowed by the passion and enthusiasm and pride and warmth with which they spoke about the business, the leadership teams, the partners, and all of the associates. And it's really the duality of BBI's collective team pride, but also the belief in the sanctity of the individual's effort that combined with community outreach that made this such a special place and that really spoke to me. And I realized I want to be part of this. And so when Bill and Chris asked me to join, the decision was easy and one that I made with my head and my heart. The third lesson I have learned along the way is to always push myself to be a courageous leader and don't increment off the status quo. Making a difference means pushing yourself to think about transformation versus playing it safe. Whenever I start a new job, I try not to think about whether I can do this job well, but whether I should be doing this job another way. When you move into a new job, resist the temptation to increment off the status quo, even if it's going along swimmingly, okay? Because when that happens, the music's gonna stop on your watch, so you better be thinking 2 and 3 steps ahead of where this needs to go. You are new, and your biggest asset at that point is bringing fresh eyes to a situation. It's those fresh eyes that make you the transformational leader versus a manager. This attitude has really helped me over the years, whether we were transforming Jell-O in the 1990s or in 2005 at Avon, and when we encountered choppy waters, and now it helps me at Bloomin' Brands, and has provided the basis for the revitalization of Bloomin' Brands over the last 9 years. Growth for many companies in mature markets, now I'm not talking about technology, but like casual dining, which still employ the majority of folks in this country, will come through share gains from competitors versus overall category growth. And so today's consumer holds more power than ever, and they are more discerning than ever. And the companies that win in today's environment will be those that provide the most differentiated, holistic customer experience, the most benefits for the best price, the superior value. You won't win on price or quality alone. Your experience has to be differentiated and de-averaged from your industry competitors, and you have to be as innovative as possible to keep up with where the customer's going. And for a period of time at BBI, we lost sight of this. The organization had much deserved pride in the Outback Way after 20 years of incredible success. I mean, they were on the cover of Inc. as the most innovative company in the US. They really revolutionized casual dining. There was no such thing as casual dining before the founders bought it 30 years ago. And so we were very vested in that. But in some ways, that pride made us afraid to evolve in key areas. It was almost like people felt that changing would be disrespectful to the legacy. We have a new philosophy that guides us at BBI and protects our heritage. We say we have to honor the past, master the present, and build for the future. That means keeping a deep understanding about our brands, our DNA that never changes, but putting the customer at the center of everything we do so we're constantly evolving to meet their needs. Continuous, restless innovation has led us to some of our most important innovations over the years. We've also experienced, and I have presided over, the pain of taking an extended victory lap and not keeping up with the trends fast enough. After 5 years of significant share gains, our growth slowed and lagged the industry in 2015 and 2016. We'd gotten complacent with our success as we qualified new levers for growth. We got a wake-up call in the form of disappointing performance, declining stock price, and every CEO's worst nightmare, an activist investor. When you don't perform and you don't innovate and you don't keep up with the customer, you allow yourself to become vulnerable. I'm incredibly proud of how the team rallied, right? So there's gonna be times that we all know we need to fix the roof out when it's sunny, but we seldom do. And then it's about how your team responds in times of crisis and in times, and that's where true grit and true courage and true leadership emerge. And I am incredibly proud of the work the team did to restore us to growth. And it was during this tough time, but inspiring time, that we came up with our most recent and important innovations that have restored us to business growth and that are putting us at the forefront on how the dining industry's changed. We came out with the only successful, I would say, loyalty program in the casual dining industry that leverages across all of our brands. We also are the only casual dining restaurant that is going all in on building our own delivery network. That's a big step because we simply believe and know that 30% of our volume is going to come from people that want to stay in their home but enjoy restaurant-style brands, and I want them to be my customer. He who owns the customer. Never allow yourself to be disintermediated. Never allow yourself to be disintermediated from your customer. I am on the board of Hilton, and I can tell you right now, if they could go in the Wayback Machines, they would not have provided, they wouldn't be disintermediated with their customer, and they've done a brilliant job going direct. So we have really jumped in the water. We've received a lot of questioning, criticism. Now we're beginning to look pretty smart, right? So that's the other thing. I want to tell you guys, you're never as good as they say you are, and you're never as bad as they say you are. Just have the courage of your convictions, right? So if 2 years we were second guessed, and now we're looking pretty bright, right? Now things have gone the other way for me as well. I don't want to mislead you. I've done things that look pretty good for the 2 years and then didn't. But that's a whole separate lesson. Probably a little more painful. We've had a number of e-commerce innovations as well. And so, we all have to be in the business transformation versus executing the status quo. And I remind myself all the time, as I said, our mantra is, if we don't like change, we are going to like irrelevance a lot less. And you just got to remember that. My fourth piece of advice is please, please make the time to mentor and teach. It is the most important thing you can do to make a difference. No matter what stage, and this is not just, and by the way, this doesn't belong to the HR executives in the room. We are all responsible for nurturing and talent development. The best nurturers and talent developers are leaders who have the confidence, the candor, and the humility to openly discuss their failures as well as their successes. Every executive I know, and don't you always hear, will tell you they want risk takers in your organization. I want risk takers. I want people that aren't afraid to break things. Well, what's the likelihood that you're going to get risk takers if you haven't demystified failure by talking about your own mistakes openly? If you want an organization that can come up with the big ideas and isn't afraid of failure, guess what? You go first. I remember I was speaking at the Fortune Women's Conference, and I was on a panel, and of course the question came, it was me and another female executive, and this was the Fortune Most Powerful Women's list, which was kind of fun. I was 43, I got named to this list. My mother was proud, she had several of the magazines, and they asked me to speak on a nice panel, and I got a good swag bag. And we got a question, which was, can you talk about your failures? And so this other person who I won't name, but you would recognize, spoke first because she was higher on the list, I guess. But she starts this long, involved story about, I still can't really follow it, about how the team failed. And, here was the gist of it. She failed on this one particular thing because she had a weak team. And I'm looking at her, and I can't behave. Papa will tell you this. I can only behave for chunks of time. And so it really is remarkable that it's been 9 years. But I just looked at her, and I was like, would you like one of my failures? Because I have some that were really mine with my hands all over them. If you need to borrow one, I've got a ton of them. Because I thought, really, what is that teaching people that, obviously you've had some success, you're here, but that's not really that helpful to talk about your success. What's more instructive is to talk about your failures. And so I have always been really transparent. All those who work with me from Kraft would recall I have a wall of shame there in Avon. And on the wall, I had every difficult business decision I provided over or bad decision making, and I used to call it my wall of shame, and I would trot new product managers, new folks in, and middle managers, and I would show them, and the reaction was priceless. Like, some of them would go, mint Jell-O? That's so stupid. And then they'd look at me, and I was like the division president, and they'd go, well, I'm sure it was a very good idea at the time. I was like, no, it's really stupid. It costs about $4 million to recall. So, you got to no, you're right. I thought it was a good idea. And I don't have to go that far back. I mean, look, at Bloomin' Brands, we've done really well internationally, but for the last 4 years, we have labored to get Outback to be successful in China. And we started out, because we've been so successful in Brazil, we started out on a company-owned policy, and we were dogged about that. And every time we got successful, we got ripped off immediately by a local competitor who priced it, 20% cheaper. Finally, it was time to call the audible and say, you know what? I was wrong. We can't manage this entirely company-owned from the US. China is a completely different environment, a completely different structure, and so we had to rethink our strategy. So the other thing, I would say is when you are in that position, today when I interview people for the job, though, I am looking and asking them to talk about that mistake and that setback. I want to hear about the poor decisions they made, the mistakes that they regret. These are the leaders who are more likely to have a sense of humility rather than hubris, and who do the right thing even when it has the potential to make them look bad. I am extremely suspicious of people that spend a lot of time proving themselves irreplaceable. Be very weary of the celebrity CEO, okay? That's very dangerous, because you're spending a lot of time making yourself look irreplaceable. Now think about it. If there is no one on the bench to succeed you, whose fault is that? Trust me, there are a lot of capable people in your organization. You just didn't do your job as a leader, and your number one job as a leader is to nurture and to develop talent. I can always spot somebody that has come to the end of their leadership capability when they talk to me about, who can replace me? I can't move and take that big job. Who can replace me? Okay, you haven't done your job. You haven't recognized that as a leader, your most important job is to nurture and develop talent in your organization. There's another important thing about taking the time to mentor and teach, and I'm going to wrap it up. You'll learn a tremendous amount. The personal insights I've gained from people I was supposedly teaching, what they've taught me, have been invaluable. And I'm just going to share with you a story which everybody in my group has heard. My first direct report ever, or as my friends have called him, the poor bastard that was Liz's first direct report ever, was when I got promoted to product manager at Kraft. And I had been a great assistant product manager. I was top of this and top of analyst. And now I was ready to be a manager. And I had my first one. And he was a great, smart guy. And he was top of the class. And his name was Michael Walker. And so I was, going into it and teaching him. And I sat him down. I went over everything. I trained him. I kept training him. And he was awful. I mean, the first 4 months, it was just, 4 weeks, it was a disaster. I couldn't find him, I couldn't do it. And he's really, really bright and clearly very, very capable. And so then I was like, it's time for the talk. I'm ready for this. I took the leadership course. I brought him in, and I said, how do you think it's going? Share some thoughts on how I think it's going. I mean, we've had a really rough start. I don't really understand why you're not taking responsibility and accountability and doing the things you're supposed to be doing. And I said, do you have any thoughts? And he sure did. And he looked at me and he said, you're like this big dog with these giant spiky teeth holding a bone. And you keep saying to me, come on, Michael, reach in, take the bone. It's your bone now. Come on, reach in, take it. And if you just put the bone down and walk away, I would pick it up. I'm like, excuse me, I'm the I'm the product manager. And I'm telling you, it has stayed with me to this day. He gave me a giant dog bone. And by the way, he's like ragingly successful, was, hugely successful at Mattel, et cetera, and became a dear friend of mine because I learned the most important lesson. We are all wired in a certain way. Some of you are pleasers. Some of you always have to be right. Some of you are too controlling, have to get the last word. We're all wired. We all have our derailers. You probably have figured out what mine is. Really too controlling. But the best thing we can do is be aware of our derailers and take responsibility for them. So as a leader, I really monitor myself to make sure I'm guiding and setting direction and try to stop myself from overmanaging, which is a tendency of mine. I actively solicit my team's feedback on this. They know they can tell me anything. That doesn't mean I'll always agree, but I'm always going to be open. So here's what I would say to you. Set a vision, a direction, and let your people rise to the occasion. Most times they will, and they will nail it. And maybe a different way than you would have, and that's okay, because diversity of styles and thinkings makes for better team performances. If I'm having a difficult situation with a team member of mine or a direct report, more often than not, I am the source of the problem. And that's difficult. That's the drive home in the car where you talk to yourself. My final thought, and I don't know, I think this is the most important one maybe, I hope it is please remember to live a 360-degree life. Although I have had the most profound privilege of a truly rewarding career that I love, I have maybe an odd confession to make at the Darla Moore School of Business. My career is definitely not the most important thing in my life. My family and my friends are. I have two amazing sons, Henry and William, who are 20 and 17, and they serve as my true north. My work has never solely defined me, and this has helped me ride out the ups and downs of the job. Whenever I face a tough or unpopular decision or stick my neck out at work, I have the security of knowing that my entire identity is not tied up in the outcome. When work is not your whole life, it's very freeing and allows you to be more objective, clear-headed in your decision-making. It makes you a better leader. A passion for life outside the walls of the company has made me more creative, focused, and a better prioritizer. In our global economy, it is possible to work 24/7 in this wired economy. And when I see someone in the organization that drives their teams like this, the business results are typically suboptimal. Think about it. If you don't have a vested interest in having more in your life than just a job, decisions languish, speed to market suffer, and people burn out. It's important for me, it's desperately important for me to acknowledge all the opportunities I have had. I was born on third, and I never want to believe that I hit a home run. That's one of my favorite sayings, okay? And so it's really important that you pay it forward. It is not enough to be good at the job that pays you well. And so that's a really important piece of my life. I came here from New York where we had our annual fundraiser on UNICEF, and I've been on the board of UNICEF and Big Brothers Big Sisters, Big Brothers Big Sisters for 12 or 14 years, and I'm on the board of UNICEF. I'm also on the board of the Atlanta Fed, Hilton, which does pay me, and the Moffitt Cancer Center. And I joined Moffitt Cancer Center because my sister got melanoma, and you know, they saved her life. And so, rather than just saying thank you, how do you get involved and serve? It's all of our responsibility to take the blessings that we have and to pay them forward, because I was given tremendous opportunity. So I try to pay a small piece of it forward if I can. So those are the 5 things I've learned over the years that has helped me most in my journey. Some days I remember them, some days I forget them and stumble, but I forgive myself and I try again. So in closing, my hope for all of us as we continue on our journeys is that we lead inspired lives and that we always believe in our work's mission, and that because no matter what you do, regardless of your function, your expertise, industry, or title, you deserve to be fulfilled and you can make a difference in some way. Together, one day at a time, one decision at a time, and one personal mission at a time, each of us can make a difference. And so I'd like to thank you guys for giving me the opportunity to speak with you today, and for this amazing award. Thank you.
Okay, so before we close, I want to thank a few people. First of all, I want to thank Liz, the Bloomin' Brands team, and Marty for coming today. All of you students that think you're so busy, guess what? They're busier than you are. So really appreciate you all taking the time with us. I also want to thank Tina Poindexter, who's been really helpful in organizing a lot of this. And then in order of proximal or distal to proximal bosses, I want to thank 3 of my bosses for being here. First is Provost Joan Gable, who came and talked about a busy schedule. We appreciate Joan coming. Second, appreciate Dean Bruce for being here and being able to do the welcome. And then last and most important, Corey, please stand. I want to thank Corey Jones, who's my most proximal boss, who has done absolutely everything to put this meeting together, as I've been kind of out of it for a while. So Corey's really responsible for everything. Can't thank her enough. Thanks to all of you for coming today and sharing in this ceremony. Hope you'll have a chance to talk to Liz, and hope you found her words as insightful and as inspiring as I did. So thanks for coming.